Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki. And on Street Talk, what we do, we talk about things that's happening in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. Other thing on Street Talk, we deal with political, social, and economics. Now, joining me tonight is one of my favorite friends, Mr. Dennis Burnside.
What's up, bro?
We got so much to talk about, but let's first deal with how the policemen's now dealing with a lot of young blacks, and you know, I come along doing the years earlier, and to think about, when I think about it now, um, we, you know, it was tough, but we wasn't being shot like now. What's happening now?
Well,
Is it that they now that they can see it, they can see it, they can pick it up now on cameras and all that. That's what's happening?
I think the difference between today and years past is this here. Everyone has a camera, everyone has a video, so you can document what's occurring in the streets a lot easier. There's been decades of police abuse on African American citizens that has been written off as hyperbole or outright lies, that the officers would never do that. They don't behave that way in my neighborhood, and there's no evidence. It came down to the word of the officer against the citizen. And when the citizen is already disrespected, when the citizen is already living in a police state, when the citizen is already underrepresented in terms of his political influence, he or she had no recourse. Police brutality has not diminished or increased. It's always been there, but now we have the means to document it. And I think that's the thing that's opening up so many eyes. I think even people in the black community weren't aware to the extent that it occurs. It's almost a daily occurrence. I think at one point this year, in the first half of the year, there had been 3 police shootings every day, with several of those resulting in fatalities. I haven't seen any updated numbers in the second half of the year. I mean, here we are at the end of August 2016, but I don't think that it's any different than the way it's always been, Ahmad. I think the difference is now we have a way to easily document it.
So now we see it, and one of the things with me is that, and I'm just saying for me, I don't know how many. I was reading one thing a couple of weeks ago. They were saying, I forget how many shootings it had been in the last 10 years, something like that. 10 or 15, 10 or 12 years. Anyway, only 24 24 of those out of all these shootings going on from the 10 or 12 years, only 24, 27 of the people who did the shooting had to do any time, anything like that.
The policeman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
24, 27 of them.
I'm surprised it's that high.
10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's that high. Some of the numbers I've heard is 1 or 2 in all these years where a police officer has actually been arrested, indicted, charged, brought to trial, and convicted for shooting and killing a black citizen. I heard at that time there's only 1 or 2 in the entire history of the United States, so it could be a different number than that, but whatever the number is, whether it's 1 or 50, it's minuscule relative to the number of people who've been shot. And it shows you some disparity. It shows you great disparity in terms of the justice offered some citizens as opposed to others. It cannot be explained in any other way other than police brutality and racism that's been brought down on the citizens of color in the United States. Now, I'm one who believes that since 9/11, in the years it's found and increasingly, we're increasingly living under police state. Mm-hmm. They can monitor your phone calls, mm-hmm. listen to your phone calls, mm-hmm. Intercept your communications in various ways without any warrant, without any probable cause, mm-hmm. and it's completely legal. I mean, we have the Military Commissions Act, we have the Patriot Act, we have all these extra constitutional means for the government to intrude on our daily interactions. So the police state is expanding and it's becoming more and more pervasive, but it's always been that way in the black community. Mm-hmm. They've always had the right to knock down your door in the middle of the mm-hmm. night and not have a warrant. Mm-hmm. They've always had the right to tell you not to stand on the corner, mm-hmm. even though it's a public a place and you have every right under the Constitution, mm-hmm. under the sun, to stand there and break bread or share a drink with your friends. Yeah. But it's always been a means of letting us know who's in charge and to monitor us. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't tell you how many times in a business environment I've been in a conversation with 2 or 3 other African Americans, mm-hmm. and some Caucasian will walk up and say, "Hey, what's going on? You guys break it up now." You know, mm-hmm. it's almost an intuitive reaction to seeing more than one African Americans standing there discussing whatever the issue is. Mm-hmm. At that time in my life and knowing me, we were probably talking about sports, mm-hmm. you know, something silly. Mm-hmm. But the idea that that's a threat, mm-hmm. I think can be traced back to some of the enslaved Africans rebelling in the 19th century, even the 18th century, and the fear of what would happen if the tables were ever turned. Mm-hmm. So the police state that we've been living under for, you know, hundreds of years, mm-hmm. is now starting to expand over to the public at large, and people are chafing against it. You know, without getting back to what we've talked about in the past few weeks, but in my mind, it has a lot to do with the otherwise inexplicable support for a guy like Donald Trump. The guy's not that bright. He speaks at a 5th grader's level. Mm-hmm. He lies consistently. If there's one thing that he does all the time is lie. Yeah. He has really no plans that he can put on paper, mm-hmm. and document how he's going to do them. Mm-hmm. He can put up a slogan like "Build a wall, get rid of him," and people just flock to him. And I think that's because at a visceral level, the working class, the middle class, the everyday job-needing Caucasian man and woman now sees that things aren't the way they were when they were little kids eating cereal, watching Leave It to Beaver, and their mother and father had those good factory jobs. Things have changed, mm-hmm. and there's a much more sinister political environment that they're looking at in a way that's scary to them. And you know, by all rights, they ought to be scared. Mm-hmm. They ought to be afraid. But it's nothing new for us. Nothing new for us at all.
Okay, we've got the. You know, we got phones and all these other things. We got proof, but just take a few months ago when this, about 6 weeks ago, when this woman, or this lady, her little kid, and her boyfriend was in the car, and they shot her boyfriend, and she happened to have a phone, and but they try to pretend that when he was speaking, wasn't none of that true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like the wife comes home and catches her husband in bed with another woman. He jumps and says, "Who are you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes?"
Mhm.
Now we've got the phone, and we can see what happened.
Yeah.
We can see the conversation prior to the gunshot. We can see the conversation afterward.
Mhm.
And she had to remain calm and steady in order to save her own life and the life of her daughter, perhaps.
Okay.
Because that cop, in that particular instance, was off the rails. He was completely emotionally off the rails. Now, that leads me to another area of discussion, and that's what is being imparted into these men and women who wear that blue uniform that makes them think, A, this job is so dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really not. There's 10 professions, construction, deep sea fishing. I mean, there's a long list of occupations where you have a much higher chance of losing your life and having serious injuries than being a police officer. But what makes them think that, A, this job is so dangerous that they have to take every interaction with the citizen as one that could be their very last, and B, and I guess this is the one that really bothers me, what makes them think their life is so valuable that I need to turn in the life of my brother and my cousin or my niece and my nephew in order to keep them safe? Now, I was horrified when we had that spate of police shootings in early summer. We had the one in Dallas, and then we had another one, I forget the city. And it spoke to me of frustration and anger on the other side of the coin, and people reacting. And in fact, that's what it was. It wasn't any type of tactical, coordinated conspiracy among like-minded people like you had in the book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It was simply frustrated and angry individuals who said, I'm going to change this, because for me, I've had enough. Now, obviously, that's an irrational way to respond, particularly in Dallas, where you had one of the most progressive police forces in the United States that actually has made an effort to reach out to the community in terms of how they interact with the community and how they hire. And he wasn't from Dallas.
Right.
So it was an irrational, illogical, and immoral response to his frustration. But I understand the frustration because it just does not seem to stop. Every day you pick up a paper or you go online and you see another case where a police shot an unarmed African American or armed legally, posing no threat, like the gentleman in Minnesota. He told the officer, I have a legal firearm, I have all the certification. Officer demanded he reach for his ID. As he's reaching for his ID, this guy is so stoked up. I mean, is it steroids? Is it some type of drug that they're on to get them through the stress of the day? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's inexcusable the way they repeatedly act, and it's going to keep happening, because if you look back, you look at Akia Boyd, if you look at Mike Brown, if you look at Trayvon Martin, you go down the line, this long line. What's the outcome been? Have any of these people stood trial? Have any of these people who were victims or relatives of the victims had their day in court and saw justice come? No. Of course not. So when that continues to happen, you're going to continue to have this same hatred and distrust and enmity between the people who are sworn to protect and serve and those who are the victims of these extra-constitutional, in a lot of ways, I don't want to call them police officers. There's something beyond that. But they're not keeping the peace. They're keeping control, and there's a big difference.
Well, okay, now we can, 20 years ago, we wasn't able to see it and witness it, all this. But now we can witness it and still. So what are you saying?
Well, that speaks to our lack of political power, our lack of economic power. We've had one candidate this year, in the 2016 presidential campaign make major speeches on on police brutality and police shootings. And he got minuscule support from the African American community. Had he had commensurate support from the African American community that his opponent got, he'd have been the Democratic primary nominee. He spoke out. He said, we need to address this. This is something that is immoral and illegal and can no longer go on. And he made several speeches on this, and he reached out to Black Lives Matter. He made these type of efforts, and I'm speaking of Bernie Sanders in case people have a short memory, but he wasn't going into the black churches. He wasn't singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. He didn't have a cornbread recipe and a bottle of hot sauce in his purse, so black folks didn't support him. On the other hand, the very candidate who was one of the top advocates of the police state and the prison industrial complex and helped build the prison industrial complex is being feted now as somehow our savior and the one we should support. Supporting her is dubious in my mind. I've said on this show, and I've said to you privately, if I lived in a red state or if I lived in a overwhelmingly blue state for that matter, I would vote for Jill Stein of the Green Party, because I think we need to make a statement about the status quo and how it cannot continue to go on. But I'm in that same old trick bag as the rest of us are. If I don't vote for Hillary Clinton, I go for voting for someone who obviously doesn't support us when it comes down to things on the ground that can impact my life and the life of my fellow citizens and my nieces and nephews and sons and daughters. But if I don't vote for her, I've got to vote for a retrograde, avowed racist who can take us out of the frying pan and put us straight into the fire. And if I vote for someone like Jill Stein, or if I write your name in, I've essentially voted for Donald Trump. So I'm in that trick bag, and I hate it. I absolutely hate the position that I'm in. But we don't have the political flexibility and the political savviness to be able to say, look, Democratic Party, you're going to get rid of that DLC. You're going to get rid of these big pro-business policies. You're going to get rid of these insane trade policies, or we're not going to support you. We've got a viable alternative over here. But the time to start that movement is now, so when 2020 rolls around, we've got a voice. Mm-hmm. But right now it's the same way it's been since 1963.
Well, to me, when I look at people like Barbara Jordan, doing her time, and she's been dead 30 years now.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
You know, she was able to her along with others, but she was able to make us make a change. I'll put it like that.
I agree with you. It's been her. It's been John Conyers. It's been Barbara Lee. There's been myriad African Americans and Hispanics at that congressional level who have made a difference. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're impotent. I'm saying that if we want that fundamental change, that hinge that changes the direction of the party, that makes them acknowledge our value and recognize what we want done, it's going to have to happen in a different way than what we've been doing since 1963, and that's reflexively voting for the Democrats. I hear Uncle Toms, that represent the Republicans all the time saying, well, if you want to change, you got to get off that Democratic plantation. And my response is, yeah, brother, and go to the Republican plantation and shine shoes and pass off Rodorvs like you're doing?
Yeah.
Is that what my choice is? I'm talking about something different than that. I'm talking about true economic power. I'm talking about true political power. I'm talking about building a coalition among our people that can be used to leverage our vote en masse in a way that Jewish people do,
Yeah.
that the gay and lesbian community have been able to do, that Asian Americans are able to do.
Yeah.
They coalesce around a few key issues and they demand attention. And one of the things that disappointed me about President Obama so much was he went out of his way to tell us, I don't have to do a damn thing for you. You don't come in here and tell me I need to do something for black people. I'm gonna do something for all people. And then and on the surface from 30,000 feet, it sounds, yeah, you're right. You ought to do what's good for all Americans, and if you do what's good for all Americans, because we're Americans, it'll be good for us too. But that ignores the view from the ground.
Okay.
When you're down here where youth unemployment in any American city is over 40%, where employment of African American women in any city in America is unemployment in the 16 and 17%, and even though among those who are employed, they're underemployed. They have much more skills and much more education than the jobs they typically are able to gain. So we're in dire straits, and we need to see something change. But to go back to your original question, in order for us to affect the type of change in our relationships with the police state, it's going to take us standing up as one voice and saying, here's what we won't bring to the table. Here's what we will bring to the table if you make these adjustments and if you make these changes. One of the things I love about the Black Lives Matter movement is they have an economic component to their message. And these young people are through social media, Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and all these different type of media they're using. They are now starting to identify businesses and boycott those businesses en masse. And that is the type of thing that hits them where it hurts. Because you hit them in the pocket. You hit them in the heart and you appeal to their morality. You hit them here with logic and you appeal to their intellect. Could care less.
Right.
Because it doesn't help their money.
No.
But when you impact their money either positively or negatively, they're going to listen to you. And I think that's what we need to get to.
Well, okay. You were speaking about Black Lives Matter. Do they have maybe and I was reading this, and also I was listening to somebody was talking about them a couple months ago. Do we have 6 or 7 things that they are trying to get through?
Oh yeah, they actually, that was one of the criticisms early on is they don't have an agenda. They don't have an agenda.
Right, yeah.
They don't have an agenda. At the very same time where they had at one point, I don't know what it is now, but they had a 42-page manifesto.
Okay.
And they had a specific stepwise plan to get there. And they had a 10, 20-point plan of the things that they wanted to see done. It was very well written. It was very logical, and it was very cogent, man. It was the media or opponents of BLM relying on the apathy and the disinterest of the average Joe, and I don't care what color you are, to actually go online and say, wait a minute. I just asked myself this question, what do these people really want? Let me go see if I can find out what they really want. The same way that the man or woman clips coupons, or they go online and they research a new car, or they go to the library and they read a book on gardening, whatever their interest is. Same opportunities right there in front of you with any of these issues. But most people just don't feel like doing it. For whatever reason, it doesn't interest them, or it doesn't seem like something that's in their lane, to use vernacular. So Black Lives Matter has been easily disparaged and propagandized against because people don't know what they've been saying from day one. The people who do know will stand proud and support them. I'll never forget, man, 2-3 weeks ago, as usual, you and I were talking at the Y, and a young man came into the sauna, and I don't know his name. You would recognize him if you saw him. And at that particular time, it was just he and I in there, and he asked me, didn't I think that Black Lives Matter was racist? And I was confused by the question. I said, well, first of all, racism is a power construct. So black folks don't have the power to be racist because we can't deny you bank loans and school applications, et cetera, et cetera. No. Are you asking me, do I believe they're bigoted or biased or prejudiced? Is that what you're asking me? He said, yeah. I said, well, why would you think that? He said, well, don't white lives matter? I said, well, okay. Let's look at it this way. If somebody came up to you and they said black lives matter too, would that help your understanding? We're not saying that white lives don't matter,
You're right.
or Asian lives don't matter, or police lives don't matter, or bookkeepers' lives don't matter, or whatever the group is. We're saying that this particular group of people who seem to be on the wrong end of a bullet more often than not, on the wrong end of a police nightstick more often than not, matter too. Yeah. And you just can't keep continuing to go on unabashedly abusing us and murdering us without some repercussions. You can't understand that? Well, I guess now that you put it that way, he says to me. And I asked him, why do I need to put it to you that way? Isn't it plain upon its face what this is all about? Apparently not. Apparently not, Ahmad. There's enough people out here who are in denial, and not just white folks. You know, you got your Uncle Tom fraction out there who think that, you know, just like in Malcolm's day, where he was a troublemaker. Just like when Ali changed his name from Cassius Clay, when Martin Luther King said that we got to get out of Vietnam and we have to march for economic justice. Oh, you're troublemakers. Oh, you're stirring up the pot. We're not ready for that yet. You always will have those type of people who will drag you down if you let them. Progress for them is a threat. Progress for them is something that is dangerous because you stick your head up, you might get it chopped off. You know, those people are cowards and punks, or they're racist or bigots, or they're just ignorant. I don't have time for them. Now, because that kid asked me that question and I felt that he was honestly seeking information, I indulged him. We had a good conversation. We probably talked for 20 minutes. But typically, that's just a way of them saying to you, look, I don't want to hear it. You say Black Lives Matter, well, police lives matter, and shut up. That's the message that they're really conveying.
I guess that's about all the time we have. My name is Ahmad Shakaraka, and we catch you down the streets for more street talk.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.